Welcome back. A former top-ranking Vatican official is calling on Pope Francis to resign. Archbishop Carlo Maria Viano, a former Vatican ambassador to the U.S., says he told the Pope back in 2013 about allegations against Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. McCarrick is the former Archbishop of Washington, D.C., who resigned last month over accusations he sexually abused seminary students and an altar boy. In an 11-page letter, Viano calls on Francis and says he ignored his warnings about McCarrick and even lifted sanctions imposed on him by his predecessor, Benedict XVI. Here's part of the Archbishop's statement. Pope Francis knew from at least June 23, 2013, that McCarrick was a serial predator. Although he knew that he was a corrupt man, he covered for him to the bitter end. Indeed, he made McCarrick's advice his own, which was certainly not inspired by the sound intentions and love for the Church. It was only when he was forced by the report of the abuse of a minor, again on the basis of media attention, that he took action regarding McCarrick to save his image in the media. In this extremely dramatic moment for the universal Church, he must acknowledge his mistakes, and in keeping with the proclaimed principle of zero tolerance, Pope Francis must be the first to set a good example for cardinals and bishops who covered up McCarrick's abuses and resign along with all of them. Joining me now to discuss this is Newsmax's chief political columnist, John Gizzi. John is also an authority on the Catholic Church, and thanks for being here again, John. Great to see you.
Thanks for being here again, John. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, and this is a grave time for the Catholic Church, no question about it.
It is indeed, John. Pope Francis is refusing even to address Viano's allegations. Now, the timing of these has also raised some speculation from some that this is a, quote, coordinated attack against Pope Francis by the conservative wing of the Church. What do you say to that?
No, that's not true, although I will certainly admit that the conservative wing of the Church, who venerates Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI and his predecessor, John Paul II, does not have the same feeling toward the incumbent pope for a variety of reasons, but they have nothing to do with the politics of the Church or the punishment of Church officials. I will say Archbishop Viano, the former ambassador or nuncio, as is the official term, was no friend of Pope Francis, and at the same time, he does make a strong point. Number one, McCarrick's resignation as Archbishop of Washington was one of the first acts by Pope Benedict when he assumed the helm of the Church in 2005. As soon as Cardinal McCarrick turned 75, his resignation was accepted, and of course, Cardinal Wuerl assumed the position. Second, he was in relative obscurity until he reportedly was the conduit between Latin American cardinals and others who were more liberal in the Church, who wanted a more liberal successor to Pope Benedict. That, of course, was Cardinal Bergoglio of Argentina, now Francis. So they have a close relationship, and his rehabilitation doesn't surprise me.
All right, there's another part of the statement from Viano that I want to read here, and he says, quote, "We must tear down the conspiracy of silence with which bishops and priests have protected themselves at the expense of their faithful, a conspiracy of silence that, in the eyes of the world, risks making the Church look like a sect, a conspiracy of silence not so dissimilar from the one that prevails in the mafia." John, should there be a wide-scale purge of the leadership in the Catholic Church, starting with Pope Francis, or is there another solution to this problem?
Well, again, there are no rules with which to have such a purge, such a cleanup operation, unless the Pope follows the example of Pope Benedict and abdicates. Now, right now, betting is very strongly against that among those who watch the Church. There would then be a meeting of the College of Cardinals in which conservatives have a slight 53 to 47% advantage over cardinals named by Francis. And it would be very risky for him and his followers for him to leave. As to whether it should happen or not, I can't truly say, because a lot of people, notably Cardinal Wuerl here in Washington, are blamed for things that they tried to clean up. I think we're going to hear about this for a long time, and we'll have a lot of other names that are aired in public before this solution is found.
And you told me last week that you thought this might be the end for Cardinal Donald Wuerl as well.
Yes, it could be, but since then, I've seen evidence. While he was in Pittsburgh, and remember something, this report, the grand jury report, focuses not on what he's done in Washington, but what he did when he was in Pittsburgh, when the rules for relieving priests were different, and the zero-tolerance policy that now is the official church agenda did not come about. 18 priests who were charged with misbehavior toward minors were removed under Archbishop Wuerl, and 13 other priests died or left the order before they could be prosecuted.
Wuerl also went to the Vatican personally to try and get McCarrick's.
Are starting to offer evidence, so I'm not as convinced that his tenure will be up. Let's keep an eye on
John. Unfortunately,
watch developments carefully.
We will indeed. You hear the music. That means we got to go. It's great to see you as always, and thanks for your insight on this. Thank you to Rick Unger and Ed Pasquale as well. Coming up, we continue to remember the life and legacy of Senator John McCain. Stick around.